There's a guy, maybe you know him, maybe you are him, standing in his kitchen at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. Nobody's coming over, nobody asked him to make anything. He's got a cast iron skillet heating up, garlic already in the oil, and he's slicing a steak he dry brined the night before. The whole apartment smells like something a restaurant would charge you $40 for, and he's eating it on a plate, at a table, alone, by choice. I'm Frank, and that guy isn't sad. That guy is onto something that a lot of people in relationships still haven't worked out. Close to 40 million American households right now are one person. That's 29% of all households in the country, according to the Census Bureau, the highest number ever recorded. A sociologist at NYU called it the biggest demographic change in the last century that we failed to take seriously. And somewhere inside that number is a Gen X man who isn't just surviving alone, he's seasoning a cast iron pan and timing his sear by sound. So why is he cooking? Not because he has to. Because something about standing in that kitchen does something nothing else in his day does. The American Time Use Survey tracked cooking behavior in this country from 2003 to 2023. In 2003, only 36% of men reported cooking at home. By 2023, that number hit 52%. That's not a small shift. That's a generation of men who walked into kitchens they were never expected to be in and stayed. The biggest jump happened among college-educated men, an 18 percentage point increase in 2 decades. And the men who cook are spending more time doing it too. They went from an average of 45 minutes a day to 50. 5 extra minutes might not sound like a lot until you realize that women's cooking time didn't move at all in the same period. It stayed flat at 71 minutes. The men didn't catch up, but they showed up. Now, a lot of people would look at a man living alone and cooking himself a proper meal and think he's compensating for something. Like the cooking is the consolation prize. No partner, so he learned to braise short ribs. As if all that effort in the kitchen is really just loneliness wearing an apron. But here's what the data actually says. The HelloFresh State of Home Cooking Report from 2025 found that 56% of men feel joyful when cooking for others. That's higher than women, who came in at 51%. And 71% of all Americans said cooking is more stress-relieving than stressful. Not neutral, relieving. Like the act of doing it takes something off instead of adding to the pile. And that makes sense when you look at what cooking actually requires. You can't chop an onion and spiral about your 401k at the same time. You either pay attention to the knife or you lose a finger. Your brain has to narrow down. Researchers have found that the kind of focus cooking demands, the measuring, the timing, the adjusting, can trigger what psychologists call a flow state. That's the same zone athletes talk about, where time contracts and the noise in your head goes quiet. One study found that the mindful engagement of cooking can lower cortisol, the hormone your body pumps out when you're stressed. A 2022 study out of Australia ran a 7-week cooking program and found significant improvements in participants' physical and mental health, even though their actual eating habits didn't change. The food wasn't the medicine. The process was. So for a Gen X man living alone, someone who probably spent 30 years managing other people's problems at work, who's carrying the financial math of a generation that averages $150,000 in retirement savings against a target of $1 million, the kitchen might be the only room in the house where the score resets every night. You start with raw ingredients. You apply heat and attention. You end up with something real, and nobody grades you on it. I've been working on something on the side, a book called Psychology of Gen X. It covers a lot of the things I couldn't fit into a single video, how your parents' generation wired you for certain habits, and what those habits look like now. Links in the description if you want to check it out. And to everyone watching and commenting and sharing this stuff, Genuinely, thank you. If you want to take it a step further, I have a Patreon. Subscribers get ad-free versions of every video, your name goes in the credits, and you help keep this going. Links right there too, QR codes on screen. Now, how did these men learn to cook in the first place? Because it probably wasn't from their mothers sitting them down with a recipe card and a wooden spoon. A cross-sectional study published in the journal Nutrients looked at how people learned to cook, broken down by gender. Women mostly reported learning from a family member. Men were more likely to teach themselves. They just started doing it. Trial and error. Burned rice. Oversalted everything. Tried again the next night. That tracks with what a lot of Gen X men will tell you if you ask. They watched. Maybe it was a parent. Maybe it was a neighbor. Maybe it was a cooking show at 2 a.m. when they couldn't sleep. One study found that watching cooking programs was associated with more cooking only among men, not women. Something about seeing it done, actually watching someone break down a chicken or build a sauce from scratch, unlocked the idea that it was possible. And then some version of stubbornness took over from there. For a lot of these guys, the real education happened when they ended up alone. Divorce, a move, kids leaving. The house got quiet, and the question became, now what? You can order delivery every night. Plenty of people do. Or you can open the fridge and see what's in there, and turn it into something. And for a certain kind of person, someone who spent their whole life solving problems with whatever was available, that second option isn't a burden. It's a project. So what are they cooking? It's not frozen pizza. It's not ramen from a packet. A lot of these men are cooking with intention. Slow-cooked meats. Stews that take 3 hours and taste like 4 days of work. Cast iron everything. Because a cast iron pan is the one thing in a Gen X man's kitchen that actually gets better the more you use it. Some of them are smoking brisket on a Saturday morning just to see if they can get the bark right. Some of them took the cooking outdoors entirely. A camp stove, a Dutch oven, a fire pit in the backyard. The outdoor cooking thing isn't about roughing it. It's about slowing down on purpose. When you cook over fire, you can't set a timer and walk away. You sit there. You adjust. You wait. That kind of patience isn't something you're born with. And for a man living alone, it turns a Saturday afternoon into something that has a shape and a rhythm to it, instead of just a block of empty hours. Here's the part people don't expect. A lot of these men aren't just cooking for themselves. They're cooking for themselves and then inviting people over. A neighbor, an old friend, a grown kid who comes by on Sundays. The meal becomes the reason. Not the excuse, the actual reason for human contact. Because when you live alone, you learn fast that connection doesn't just happen on its own. You have to build it. And putting a plate of food in front of someone you care about is one of the oldest ways humans have ever said, "I'm glad you're here." The men who live alone and cook, they aren't doing it because they read an article about self-care. Most of them would never use that word. They're doing it because something about it feels right, in a way they don't need to explain. The kitchen is the one place where the effort and the result happen in the same room, in real time, with no committee and no approval chain. You cook, you eat, you clean up, and tomorrow you do it again. A study on men who live alone found that these men aspired to be what researchers called conscious and organized about food. They wanted to cook from real ingredients. They wanted to eat at a table. And they specifically distinguished themselves from what they called the stereotypical bachelor, the guy with an empty fridge and a drawer full of takeout menus. That distinction mattered to them. It was a line they drew on purpose. And that line tells you something. When a man living alone decides that his Tuesday night dinner matters, that it's worth the time to marinate the chicken, to roast the vegetables, to eat off a real plate. He's not performing for anyone. There's no audience. There's no social media post. There's just a man who decided that the meal he eats alone deserves the same attention as the one he'd make if someone important was sitting across from him. A lot of you have been in the comments sharing stories about your childhood, your parents, things you never connected until now. Those messages, that's actually what made me sit down and write a book about it. Psychology of Gen X. It's in the description. And to the people already on the Patreon and to those thinking about it, you're the reason this channel keeps going. Subscribers watch ad-free, name goes in the credits. Links below, QR codes on screen. The fridge in a Gen X man's kitchen who lives alone and cooks will tell you everything you need to know about him. It's organized. There's actual produce in the crisper. There are leftovers in containers, labeled with dates. There's hot sauce, probably 3 kinds. There's butter because he learned you can't cook anything worth eating without it. That's not a bachelor's fridge. That's a man who takes his own life seriously. And here's what's interesting about all of this. Cooking at home has been trending up across the board. The HelloFresh report found that 93% of Americans plan to cook the same amount or more in the coming year. But the men who live alone, the ones who cook because they chose to, not because a recipe kit showed up at the door, they've been doing this for years, quietly, without a hashtag, without a brand deal, just a man and a stove, and the understanding that the meal is the reward. People talk about Gen X like they're a generation that got skipped, smaller than the boomers, less flashy than the millennials. About 65 million of them still here, right in the middle of everything, handling it. And some of those men, the ones in the quiet kitchens, the ones with smoke rolling off the grill, they didn't just learn to feed themselves. They built something better than a routine. They built a relationship with their own time, and they cook inside it like it belongs to them. Because it does. Because nobody's going to plate that steak for you. Nobody's going to season that cast iron. And when you sit down at that table alone, and the food is exactly how you wanted it, not how someone else wanted it, not adjusted for another person's palate, but exactly what you chose, that's not loneliness. That's a man who knows what he likes, and isn't waiting for permission to have it. Thanks for watching. I hope this resonated with you. All links will be in the description below if you want to check them out, and I will see you in the next one.